Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're headed to West Africa
Ooh, West Africa.
to check out a project that is seriously massive and honestly pretty intriguing. It's the Niger-Benin Export Pipeline.
I've heard about this one.
Yeah, have you?
Yeah, it's quite a big deal.
Yeah, it is. So this pipeline stretches over 1,200 miles.
Wow.
That's longer than the entire state of California.
That's incredible. It's got to be one of the longest in the world.
It's the longest in Africa, for sure.
Yeah.
And it has the potential to totally transform Niger's economy.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, anytime you can suddenly export that much oil, it's
Exactly.
going to make a splash.
Yeah. So our main source for this deep dive is this fascinating report by Dr. Bakan.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah, you have.
Yeah, he writes that Energy Business Analytics newsletter on LinkedIn.
That's the one. So he really breaks down all the ins and outs of this pipeline.
He's a really smart guy. Always has interesting insights.
For sure. So let's jump right in. What's the big deal about this pipeline? Why should we care?
Well, Niger is a landlocked country in West Africa,
Right.
and they actually have some pretty substantial oil reserves.
Okay.
But they've been pretty much untapped up until now.
Interesting.
I mean, they've been producing some oil since like 2011,
Oh, wow.
but it's mainly been for domestic use.
Oh, so this is about opening up Niger's oil to the global market.
Exactly. And this pipeline is going to allow them to do just that.
So what kind of impact are we talking about here? What's going to change?
Well, they're projecting to increase oil production sixfold.
Sixfold. Wow.
Yeah, from 20,000 barrels per day to 110,000 barrels per day.
That's massive. No wonder they needed a pipeline of that size.
Yeah, seriously. And that kind of increase in production is going to have a huge economic impact.
Okay, so we're talking serious money here.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Especially for a country with a developing economy like Niger.
So who's behind all of this? Who made this happen?
Well, it's actually a joint venture between Niger and the Chinese National Petroleum Corporation.
CNPC.
Yeah, exactly. And they've got what's called a production sharing agreement,
What's that?
or PSA. Basically, it's a contract that lays out how the revenue from the oil is going to be divided.
Okay, so could you break that down for us? What is a PSA and how does it work?
Sure. So in a nutshell, a PSA is basically a contract between a government and an oil company where they agree to share the profits from oil production.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the details can vary, but generally the oil company covers the upfront costs of exploration and development.
Right.
And then they recoup those costs from the oil sales. And once they've recovered their expenses, the remaining revenue is split between the company and the government.
Oh, okay. So CNPC is fronting the money to get this pipeline up and running, and then they'll share the profits with Niger.
That's right.
But we're talking about a 1,200-mile pipeline here. Those upfront costs must have been astronomical.
You're telling me billions of dollars.
Yeah. And that's where it gets a little risky, right?
Oh, yeah, there are always risks involved in projects of this magnitude.
Sure.
I mean, CNPC actually provided Niger with a $400 million loan.
Oh, wow.
And it's linked to future oil sales.
So it's like a cash advance on those future billions.
You could say that, but it also creates a financial obligation for Niger that they'll need to repay.
Right. So there's a potential downside here, too.
Well, yeah, anytime you're dealing with this kind of money in this kind of project,
Yeah.
there are going to be risks and challenges.
It's not all sunshine and roses, then.
Definitely not. But that's what makes it so interesting, right?
Totally. This pipeline has the potential to be a game changer for Niger, but it also comes with some serious risks.
Absolutely. And we're just scratching the surface here.
This is getting good. I'm ready to dive deeper.
Me too. Let's get into it.
Okay, so before, we were talking about the potential risks with this huge loan from CNPC, but let's switch gears a bit and talk about the potential benefits for Niger.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
For sure. Dr. Bakan's report actually highlights some pretty impressive numbers.
Oh, yeah, the financial projections are pretty eye-opening.
What are we talking about here? Give us the details.
Well, for the first few years, Niger's annual income from the pipeline is projected to be around $426 million.
Wait, $426 million every year?
That's right.
That's a serious chunk of change.
It is. And it's actually a 20% increase over their typical annual revenue.
20%? Wow,
Yeah.
that's huge. I mean, that could really make a difference in people's lives.
Absolutely. Think about what they could do with that kind of money. Invest in education, healthcare infrastructure.
The possibilities are endless.
Exactly. This influx of revenue could be transformative for Niger.
Okay, so responsible management is key here.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a key point that Dr. Bakan emphasizes in his analysis.
Makes sense. So how does this pipeline fit into the global energy landscape?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. This pipeline isn't just about Niger and China.
Right.
It's a piece of a much larger puzzle.
Okay, I like where this is going.
It's a sign of China's growing influence in Africa,
Yeah.
and it has the potential to really reshape the balance of power in the region.
So we're talking geopolitics now.
Big time. It's like a geopolitical chess game with this pipeline as a key piece on the board.
And as with any chess game, the outcome is uncertain.
For sure. There are risks and uncertainties for everyone involved.
Yeah. Like what? What are we talking about here?
The fluctuating price of oil, for one.
Oh, yeah, of course.
We all know how volatile that can be. If oil prices drop significantly, it could affect both CNPC's profits and Niger's expected revenue.
Right, and that could have ripple effects throughout the region.
Exactly. It's a delicate balance.
So it's not a guaranteed win for anyone.
Not at all. It's a high-stakes game with a lot of moving parts.
But that's what makes it so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. And there are so many questions to consider.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, will the pipeline actually deliver on its promises for Niger? How will it affect the country's political landscape? What role will China play in the region's future?
These are all great questions, and they're not easy to answer.
Nope. But they're worth exploring.
For sure. It's easy to get lost in the numbers and the geopolitics, but at the end of the day, this pipeline will have a real impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations and to really think critically about these global projects.
I totally agree. Okay, so we've talked about the risks, the potential benefits for Niger, but let's zoom out a bit and think about the bigger picture, like the geopolitical stuff.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Kabakan definitely gets into that in his report.
So what's the deal there? What should we be paying attention to?
Well, one thing that really stands out is how this pipeline is kind of a symbol of China's growing influence in Africa, you know?
Right.
It's like they're investing heavily in infrastructure and development all over the continent.
It's not just about oil then. It's about strategic partnerships and, global power dynamics.
Exactly. And it's shaking things up a bit, especially for Western nations that have historically been the major players in the region.
Right. So we're talking about a shift in the balance of power.
That's right. It's creating a more multipolar world with different countries and blocs competing for influence and access to resources.
It's a high-stakes game with a lot at stake.
For sure. And like any game, the outcome is uncertain.
Which makes it all the more important to understand what's going on and, the potential consequences down the line.
Absolutely. And that's why I think Dr. Gabakin's report is so valuable.
How so?
He really challenges us to think critically about all of this, to question our assumptions and to consider different perspectives.
It's a call for informed engagement based on.
Exactly. We need to understand the complexities of these issues and hold our leaders accountable for making decisions that benefit everyone.
Not just the select few.
Right.
It's about shaping a more just and sustainable future.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think that's a great place to wrap things up. This has been a really fascinating deep dive.
It really has.
We've learned so much about this pipeline and its potential impact on Niger and the world.
It's a story with a lot of twists and turns, that's for sure.
And it's not over yet. We'll have to see how things unfold in the coming years.
Definitely. It'll be interesting to follow.
So, for our listeners out there, huge thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure being here.
And if you want to learn more about this topic, be sure to check out Dr. Kibakan's Energy Business Analytics newsletter on LinkedIn. He's got some really great insights.
He's a great follow.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking those tough questions.